Hello, hello, and welcome to another edition of Choose the Challenge. I am LaWanna Bradford with the Bradford Group as well as the Bradford Group Consulting. And for those of you who are tuning in for the very first time and are wondering, what is Choose the Challenge? Well, this is a platform designed to challenge you, to challenge systems, mores, norms, institutions, and things that will prevent you as a woman, or perhaps it's your mother, your sister, auntie, daughter, from elevating and expanding to the highest version that she can be. And these even include challenging our mindsets, those limiting beliefs that get in our way. I'm so excited because I have a very special guest today, and we are going to be talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and what it specifically means to small business. We know we hear a lot of conversation around this topic in corporate America. But for some reason, small businesses are being a little quiet around this topic. But we're going to dig deep and talk about why it isn't wise to stay quiet, and how the quieter you are, the more likely you will be left behind as the world continues to evolve and to embrace what this truly means to be diverse, inclusive, ensuring you have a platform that is equitable, but also one that embraces belonging. And before we get started, I want to give a salute to our sponsor, Help Heal Humanity.
For the past 5 years, Help Heal Humanity has successfully run an elementary school in Canaan, Haiti. Due to COVID-19, the political unrest, and the recent earthquakes, food is scarce. The students attending our program are coming to school starving, and therefore causing a disruption in their academic goals. We need your help, now more than ever, to provide these students with the nourishment they need to continue their education. Our goal is to raise $100,000 so we can feed 100 kids lunch daily and send them to school in the upcoming year. Thank you for your support.
Welcome, welcome, Dr. Kimberly Harden. How is it going, Dr. Kimberly?
Thank you, LaWanna. So good to see you again. It is going well. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you for saying yes. I know you've been doing a lot of traveling, so getting on your calendar is a bonus for me.
My pleasure. It's always nice to talk to you.
Well, I want to apologize to our listening audience in advance. If you hear some background noise in the background, of all times, my landscaper decided this is the time he wanted to come and pay me a visit. So my apologies in advance to our listening audience on 360 TV. We appreciate you coming back and watching us. And we are streaming live on Facebook, ROKU, Apple TV, as well as Samsung TV. And we want to talk a little bit about diversity, inclusion, equity, and belonging, and what it means to small business. But first, I'd like to give a formal introduction to Dr. Kimberly Harden, who is a diversity, equity, and inclusion expert. She is actually bi-coastal, traveling and servicing clients on the East Coast as well as the West Coast with her consulting company, Harden Consulting Group. She also is the author of the Allyship Challenge, How to Move Beyond Performance Allyship and Become a Genuine Accomplice. So are you ready to dig in, Dr. Kimberly?
I am.
So tell us a little bit about your background and what inspired you to become so passionate about diversity and inclusion.
So my background is I like to say that I'm on the third chapter. So chapter 1 was the traditional corporate America work path. Chapter number 2 was actually becoming a professor. And so I was a professor of communication studies for about 12 years. And now I am a full-time CEO running Harden Consulting Group, which is a diversity, equity, and inclusion belonging strategy company. So we have clients, as you mentioned, here on the East Coast and on the West Coast. So I'm in chapter 3. And the reason why I decided to go full force with my consulting, I actually didn't even plan on becoming a consultant, to be honest with you. I was invited to give a talk on campus about how to employ differently. And I took what I knew from my own previous background to talk to companies about, this is what you've done traditionally. This is how you can do it better. Everyone's saying, oh, we need to hire diversity. Well, what does that mean? Because we're all diverse. You and I both identify as African American, but we're very different. Right? So there's that diversity. So I always challenge, leaders when they say, we want to hire diversity. What does that mean? And why does that mean that? And it's a reciprocal relationship. So you're not just going to hang out a sign saying we're hiring Black people, right? So how are you going to target that audience? How are you going to engage them? How do you show them that you actually care about the community and you're not just trying to get bodies in the seats? And so I really challenged them. And as a result of that, we had people from Microsoft and Zillow and some other companies in the audience. And they approached me and said, hey, can you speak to our companies? And that's how my business grew, how it was formed, actually. That was in April. Opened the business in May and was working with Zillow in June. So it just happened organically.
One of the things that that you mentioned is taking this migration from the third chapter and now being an entrepreneur. But the one benefit that you have, Dr. Kimberly, is that your landscape or lens, if you will, is a little bit wider because of the corporate indoctrination that you've had, as well as the educational platform. So you're approaching your world of entrepreneurship very differently and much better equipped than those who grew up in the entrepreneurial ranks. And really, they hear the terminology, but they really don't know how it means and how to apply it in their day-to-day. Can you, if you were to give maybe 2 or 3 tips for that small business owner, what would it be?
To you can read up on definitions and things like that, but it's really important to translate the definitions to your own workplace. So again, when people talk about diversity, what does that mean? The term ally, in my opinion, is an empty buzzword. Everyone wants to call themselves an ally. And my question is always, what does that mean? You're an ally to whom? And what have you done to prove yourself as one? So yes, it's good to have the technical definition down, but you also have to be able to translate it. Right. So it's like when you're in school and you have to write that paper and your professor's like, don't regurgitate it. You have to like show how it applies. That's the same thing with DEI. You have to show how it applies to you, to your company, and to your community.
How difficult is it for that small business owner if you're not in, let me put it this way, if you don't know what you don't know, right?
Right.
So how do you even know where to go to get the understanding so that you have this now applied knowledge to be this ally in the browning of America, and the world in and of itself is more brown than the other. For that small business owner who is hearing the terms diversity and inclusion, and they want to become more attractive to other communities of color, maybe have more representation in their workforce, how can they get started when they look around and currently everyone looks like them, everyone they service looks like them?
That's a great question. And I would say it starts with reflection. You're right. We don't know what we don't know. But, I say that Google is a great friend, right? So you can just type in DEI. You can type in DEI in Charlotte, for example, and find out like what's happening. And then get quiet and really reflect. How can I help the local community? And what have I done to hinder the growth of the local community? So it's both. People don't like to reflect. We have this mindset that we're a good person, right? And that's a challenge in and of itself, because when people start to get quiet and reflect, they should be asking themselves, what does that even mean to be a good person? And look at the light and the shadow, because if I'm good, that means someone else is bad. So what I encourage people to do is, one, do the Google search, look at your local community. And yes, it may be predominantly one demographic, but how do you expand that? How do you build strategic partnerships so it can become more diverse? And then also really reflect and think about, what are my weaknesses? And ask people. One of the things that I used to do as a professor was have my students, it's called the Johari window. That means there's the hidden self, the blind self, the self that we know, and then the thing that everyone knows about us. Ask your friends and colleagues, what is it that you see in me that I may not see in myself? They're going to give you the truth, right? And it's what you do with that truth. You need to work on becoming better and strengthening that weakness. No one's perfect. It's okay to say, I'm missing the boat in this area. I'm going to make a plan to improve. And that's really what it's about, is actually making a plan, committing to that plan, and working through that plan.
Okay. The individuals will tell you the truth, those that are within your circle, correct?
Mm-hmm.
But if they are like you, then will they even see what you don't see as it relates to how you're showing up with in that diverse landscape? Does that make sense?
That makes perfect sense. And you're right. I mean, if you're too similar, they're not going to tell you the truth because they're the same way. But that's when you start asking other people. So it may not be your best friends. You may reach out to, secondary friends or associates or someone that you have frequent contact with, but you don't necessarily have a close relationship with. So if you are at a monthly meeting and you engage with someone, you may say, hey, we talk a lot and I would just like to get your opinion. From your point of view, where can I grow? That person will tell you.
I like what you said a little bit earlier when you said to ask, we should challenge ourselves, people of all backgrounds and experiences, to ask ourselves the question, as small business owners, how am I impacting or impressing upon the community that I live and serve? And that's a huge question of responsibility. So I'll give you an example. You're very well aware that your major corporations are putting millions and millions of dollars into the whole D&I initiatives, whether it's funding other grant programs. And Facebook in 2020 had a diversity and inclusion grant program. But in order to qualify for the grant, I loved it because one question was not only understanding what you did as a business and how you serve and your types of products, but they wanted to know, how did your business impact your community? What improvement initiatives did you have in place to serve your community? And if you weren't able to answer that clearly, then it was just a nice submission, but it didn't go anywhere. Right. So I thought that was a very interesting perspective. That was like question number 3, but beyond your name, 3, 4, your name, your company, your products, mm-hmm. and how you serve, and then how does that service the community?
That's what it's really all about. I mean, companies need to look beyond just making a profit, and they need to start looking at corporate social responsibility. And a lot of grants, a lot of organizations are really looking at that, even with employees. I've noticed that when they're starting to hire for positions, particularly leadership positions, they're asking, how did you create this space for your community? Whether it's, your own internal work community, how did you promote equity, diversity, and inclusion within your team? And how did you create mentor and coaching programs within your team to help people, get to that next level? So people are being challenged. Corporations are being challenged, and that's a good thing.
Yes, it is. I was talking to a business colleague, and we were talking about this very issue. And her comment to me was, I hear what you're saying, LaWanna, but honestly, I don't see what a Black business owner can do for me. And I thought that was really interesting. So it could be identical products, identical pricing, but because it was being offered by a Black business owner, whether it was a product and or service, she in her mind saw it as substandard.
That challenge is real. That challenge is real because people want to maintain that status quo. right? And so if you encourage that person to really reflect, they would realize that. But, you know, a lot of people don't want to hold up that mirror. Holding up the mirror for a lot of people is like the scariest thing ever. Again, it's because they have that mindset of I'm a good person, and they don't want to address what is a good person. And if I'm good, then who's bad, and what makes them so people don't want to have those conversations, but they need to. They're not going to grow. So people have a fixed mindset. They need to develop a growth mindset. But, you know, we realize that, you know, certain people who want to maintain their privilege and their status quo, they're just not going to do that.
Exactly. And it's frightening to think for, you know, the Black and Brown communities that if we didn't have initiatives, if we didn't have movements pushing to break these, the systems that are in place, it would be very difficult for us to advance. So for me, I know I get a little agitated when I hear individuals say, well, LaWanna, why should you get an exception? Why should there be grants for African-American business owners? I'm like, really? When it's much harder for us to even qualify for loan programs. And I mean, we're already in the catch-up phase. But for whatever reason, and maybe it's I don't want to deal with that, or it's not my fault kind of issue. But I find it very difficult to have those heart-to-heart conversations to say, look at the numbers. The numbers speak for themselves.
Right. The challenge is real. You know, I hear that all the time in my consulting, is people will say, well, you know, I'm not responsible for the sins of my forefathers. And I always say, no, you're not, but you're still benefiting from the sins of your forefathers. Right. So people need to acknowledge and be completely honest about that. And then also look at the data, look at the reports. We know that people of color will not apply for jobs simply because they feel like they don't have all 5, you know, job requirements. But the average white man, they may have 2, and they're going to apply for the job. And most of the time they're going to get that job. Right. And so white mediocrity wins, right? And I'm going to speak for myself, and you may have experienced this yourself, where my parents always told me, you have to be 3 times as good. You have to be more educated. You have to do this. You have to do that. And it's exhausting, and it leads to racial battle fatigue. And so that's actually the next book that I'm writing, is Sick and Tired of Being Sick and Tired. You know, Fannie Lou Hamer said it, I believe it was in 1956. Or maybe 1965. I messed up on the dates. Sorry about that. But she said it many years ago. And it's true. Why should we have to work 3 times as hard to get half as much? Right. And so the whole idea of, you know, your colleague saying, well, I don't want to buy this product from a person of color. Why not? Because it's being made by a person of color, usually someone in China or Indonesia or India. Right. So it's good enough for you to have something made by somebody, but you don't want to purchase it from a person of color. Like, that whole mindset is just very fascinating to me. And I actually like to have conversations with people like that, to get to the heart of why. I'm that person. I was that annoying child that always asked why, and I still do it. Well, why? Well, tell me more about this. Well, why? So it's quite interesting to me that people want to maintain the status quo. They don't want to, you know, acknowledge the truth. And they just want to keep blinders on. And the whole idea of, you know, you shouldn't benefit from a grant because you're a person of color. Well, let's look at affirmative action. Who's benefited the most from affirmative action? White women. So historically, white women have benefited from everything, right? So people get kind of mad at me when I tell this story, but it's the truth. It's documented. How I believe it was in 2015, Black Enterprise did a interview with, what is her name? Gloria Steinem. did an interview with Gloria Steinem. Now we know Gloria Steinem is considered the mother of feminism. She's made millions off of feminism and Miss Magazine and all those things. And so she finally admitted in 2015 that she learned about feminism from a Black woman. And so when I do my presentations, I ask that question, why did it take her so long? Right? Because if you're claiming you're an ally, if you're claiming, the sisterhood and all of this kind of stuff, then why didn't you say off the bat, I've learned what I learned from this Black woman, so this Black woman should be, given the kudos. Dorothy Pittman Hughes, give her flowers. So why wasn't that done? And the answer is, in my opinion, is that she wanted to benefit, just like, she felt like she was entitled to benefit compared to this Black woman. And it's unfortunate. But then I like to fantasize, what would Dorothy Pittman Hughes' life would have looked like if she had been acknowledged earlier? And if she had access to the millions that Gloria Steinem had access to?
Well, it's so interesting because now during Women's History Month, you typically will see Dorothy Steinem and Dorothy Pittman Hughes as they stand today, so they're doing, holding up their fists with the power symbol. And then they show them together, in their youth. And you're right. It's I had the opportunity to meet Gloria Steinem when I was in college, and she never mentioned this other person. I mean, she spoke about the movement overall, but when you think about actually the advancement of women's rights in this country, even the suffrage movement was ignited by what African American women were doing. But our story is often not told, and our Native Americans and their role,
right,
in the whole suffrage movement. It's glossed over or not even mentioned, and it's real unfortunate. And as you said, there was a benefit, there was a gain, and for me as an African American woman, or just a woman of color in this country, let's now talk about pay inequity. I am so sick and tired of hearing, well, it's a 20-cent pay gap between men and women. Well, yeah, white women and white men, and that gap gets wider and wider and wider to its 50 cents on a dollar when you're looking at Hispanic women.
Yes.
But they don't want to talk about that. Let's wrap it all up in this nice little bow. And if we do that, in your opinion, how will we actually ever truly affect change?
I love that you mentioned that. I talk about that all the time, right? And so I just call it out. I'm that person that, I tell people all the time, if I don't ruffle your feathers a little bit, then I'm not doing my job. But the whole idea of sisterhood is hogwash. The fact that, white women make more, again, it's a 20-cent difference between white men and white women, but everyone else is at least 30 to 40 cents behind, with Native Americans making the least amount of money. And so it's just interesting to me how they keep talking about sisterhood and equity and all of this stuff. And I'm like, okay, so how are you fighting for me? You're calling yourself an ally, buzzword, but yet you're not doing anything in an equitable way that's going to benefit me. Right? That's what true allyship is about. That's what true sisterhood is about. But again, it's being in a silo. It's about maintaining privilege. It's about maintaining status quo. And so, what I find is that white women, and I'm not trying to disparage any white women, but again, it's about, we want to be elevated and everybody else down below us. And it's always been like that. I mean, we talked about the suffragette movement, and even Elizabeth Cady Stanton, she was like, oh, women's rights and so on and so forth. But then she wrote a piece about, oh, well, we can't let Black women in the movement because that means that Black men are going to get power, and we know how Black men are, right? So that was her framing. So Sojourner Truth, when she gave the Ain't I a Woman speech, people think, oh, she was talking to men. No, she was not. She was speaking to the white women. When she showed up at the conference, the white women were like, don't let her speak, make her sit down, make her go away. And, there were a few white women who were like, no, she came this way. We're going to let her speak. So that speech was actually developed on the fly, specifically addressing white women. I'm a woman. I had 13 children. I had to give my babies up and wet nurse yours. Right. And so she's speaking directly to white women. So again, I really struggle with that whole talk about, sisterhood, because that has not been my experience. And if you look at the research, and I'm sure this is your experience in your research as well, a lot of people are talking the talk, but they're not walking the walk. Very few people are.
Yeah, that's so true. And I know you attended the conference that we had, so had a conversation with some of the speakers, and I was thinking, okay, what's going on here? Because I know what we had projected our numbers to be, but they definitely were not as high. In fact, just to be transparent, it was one of our lowest attended. It was actually the lowest attended event we've had. Mm. And the interesting comment was, well, individuals looked at it and they couldn't really relate to it. And I thought, well, if they had read what it was about, what couldn't they relate to? And then I was told, well, I think it was your branding, because you had you and this other woman kind of like either in the center or you were flanking. Now, the two of us happen to be women of color. Mm. And she said, so it felt like you were spotlighting you, and maybe that should have been minimized. And I paused for a moment and I said, I hear you, but I'm going to disagree. And I said, I have a problem that we can be welcomed to your platforms and stages, but you don't ever minimize yourself. But yet we're asked to minimize ourselves just so that you come. I said, I will never do that. We've been silenced for far too long. We've been, pushed in the shadows for far too long. But this is someone who's very intelligent, main stage speaker. I mean, very well known. And that was what she told me. And I thought, wow. She said, I promise you, had you changed the imaging, the results would have been different.
You shouldn't have to. And the way I look at it is that person was not meant to be there. And there was a reason the universe did not put that person in that space, which is great. But I hear that quite often myself. People will say, oh, well, you should hire a white woman as a business partner. Why? Oh, you'll get more contracts. If I have to sell myself, then I'm not going to do that. I would rather close my business than sell myself. I should not have to put a white face as my business. It's called Harden Consulting Group. I started the business. I run the business. Now, I do have white people that work for me, but I'm not saying, hey, I want you to be a partner, a face presenting partner. And I shouldn't have to. But I also know that being a DEI consultant is still a white space. I'm just going to put it out there. It's still a predominantly white space. I've had people, businesses, not give me contracts, and I'll find out later that they awarded a contract to a white woman. And I've actually had some of those employees call me or text me and say, hey, I just want to let you know the reason why they hired this person. And I actually had one person tell me, oh, the person is married to an Asian man, so that's why she got the contract. So she knows about diversity because she's married to an Asian. Oh, okay. What do you really say? But I'm not one to grovel for a contract. I'm not one to change my branding. I'm not one to go get a partner or any of those things, because they wouldn't do it for us. So why should I? Why? No, and the whole expectation that we should is very upsetting and troubling. So yeah.
Yeah, I was even thinking about, I think this was maybe 25 years ago. I remember reading in the Wall Street Journal when Maybelline was looking at its demographics, and they said, oh, we've got this emerging population over here that we're not serving. meaning African American women who've been there all along. Right. And we need to reach out and we need to have specific targeted marketing for them. But it was like 5 years later before they even put a black face as, no, it was CoverGirl, I'm sorry, not Maybelline, as the CoverGirl.
Yeah, so I can't speak, specifically to that situation, but, they want to, and I think if they're doing it well, they want to make sure that they're doing it right? They don't want to offend that population. They want to make sure that they, cross all their T's and dot all their I's. And so I'm big on focus groups and listening sessions and things like that. So, I encourage that even with my own clients. It's like, you say you want to invoke change. How do you know what you need to change, right? So I remind them, leadership is up here. You have your own idea of what needs to change, but I need to speak to the staff because they're the ones who are doing the work. So reality and perception usually don't add up. And so, that's why I speak to all of the staff at the companies that I consult with. And then I do the report. And then I say, okay, you thought the problem was this, but the staff believe the problem is this. Let's fix what they need to have fixed. And oftentimes they're like, we didn't know. That's because you don't talk to your people. You have to talk to your people. And so I think that may have been the case with CoverGirl and all of those other, cosmetic companies, that they really wanted to be thoughtful and mindful in how they approached it without just jumping the gun and doing something that could have backfired in the end.
And I think we can, success leaves clues, and I think as small businesses, we can learn so much from what the big companies are doing and how they create this attraction marketing message for other populations. But I see situations where small businesses, they do something just so in your face. It's like we weren't talking about African American women or any women of color, and all of a sudden we're going to have this big campaign, and all of our messaging has all these black and brown faces. Yeah. You're thinking, where did that come from?
Yeah, it backfires usually.
Exactly.
Same thing with we'll use Tesla as the example. It would be so disingenuous for Tesla to come out with ads featuring, black and brown people, considering how many lawsuits are they in right now? So it's like, you have this history, but now you want to create these ads. And so, again, the internet is a great thing. So YouTube is great. You can go back and look at different commercials, look at the historical view and say, okay, this company is not just getting on the bandwagon. They've been on the bandwagon. So Ben & Jerry's, for example. Ben & Jerry's has a long history of social justice, not just when Colin Kaepernick, started taking the knee, but even before that. And so people have to look at that. It would be kind of interesting to see if, Haagen-Dazs all of a sudden started doing commercials with BIPOC, because that has never been their frame of reference. They've never done that. All of their commercials, at least that I know of, has just been a simple ice cream, right? You see a spoon going smooth, gliding through the ice cream. You never see a person's hand. You never see a person's face in Haagen-Dazs. So all of a sudden, if they would start rebranding themselves, showing, BIPOC people eating, Haagen-Dazs, I'm like, okay, well, why are you doing that? Because you've never done it before. So I would question that. So I think as consumers, we need to be do a little bit more research before we start investing in brands.
If you were to, let me ask the question this way. So what has been your most successful engagement with a business where you've either seen a shift or you've received feedback that change has actually started to occur because of your work with them?
So actually, I was, to be honest, surprised with this client. I'm working with a group in Alaska, and they're a legal organization, and the executive team has just been amazing. When they hired me and said that we really want to invoke change, they meant every word of that. And so, I would send emails and I say, hey, I need this, I need that. Can you send it to me by the end of the week? I will have it in 10 minutes. Even when the executive director's on vacation, I'm like, you're on vacation? Like, why are you sending emails? I said, I don't need it for another 2 weeks. Like, I'm just giving you a heads up. But they are so responsive. They have a race equity committee that, they meet frequently. They meet every month. And now that we're at the implementation phase, they've increased their meetings to every 2 weeks. The board of directors have completely bought into it. And so they said, whatever funds you need to make this happen, we are going to do that. They've been open to every single strategic partnership that I've recommended. They're working with Native Alaskan groups, indigenous groups. So they've really reached out across the board to help not only their organization, but their community. So they're looking at, how can we not only support our organization as far as staff members, but how can we ensure that staff members want to stay here long term? So they're really putting the effort behind it. And not only that, they're putting the money behind it. And it's, we hear all the time, at least I do as a Black woman, as a consultant, people say, oh, your fee is too high. We don't want to do this. It costs too much. It takes time and money, just like any other initiative, right? So when you do your budgeting every year, you need to add in DEI for this amount of time and this amount of money. And again, you get what you pay for. So you want to lowball a consultant, you're going to get lowball work, plain and simple.
And I love what you're saying, because you provide consulting services. And often people confuse mentors, consulting, and coaches. So consulting is very different. If an individual is a small business owner, let's say with 3 to 5 individuals, but they want to become more aware in this space, would they be someone you serve, or do you have a particular target audience?
So it really depends on what it is that they do and what it is that they want to do. So sometimes I will just say, you just need some coaching or some mentoring and not necessarily consulting services. But if you're actually looking to develop a strategy and implement and evaluate, then that's a consulting situation. But if it's like, hey, I just need a few tips on, for example, how to have a conversation. There's like, okay, I will mentor you on how to have an effective communication with your staff. So it just really depends on the scope of work.
Do you provide any sort of group coaching or training around D&I initiatives?
I'm starting to. Yeah, we're going to be rolling out some programs this fall.
That's great.
I knew that there was a need, but I didn't really realize to what extent that people wanted it. And so, I'm getting a lot more requests for it. And so I'm like, okay, well, it's time to set up some group coaching. And the reason why I wanted to do group coaching versus one-on-one is because I believe that each one can teach one. And so, when someone has a challenge or a success, I want them to be able to share that with the group, and then also talk about how they overcame it or get suggestions from someone else who had that same experience.
I love that. And because this issue is a global concern, I mean, you're able to now take this group coaching, across the waters, because you, like you said, that when you're looking at, even though Alaska is a part of the U.S., but that you have the indigenous populations that have similar struggles. You look at what's happening in the UK, you look at Australia. I mean, these conversations are happening in, smaller buckets. But again, I think we need to do a better job on the small business level to not just create that awareness, have the conversation, shift the narrative, but then have individuals like you come in and provide the coaching and the tools and the resources so that we can show up better for our communities and be a part of the solution rather than contributing to the ongoing problem.
Absolutely. And I'm also a firm believer in strategic partnerships. And so if I have 2 clients that do pretty much the exact same thing, I will, have conversations and say, hey, I have a client in this location doing the exact same thing, and you're doing this, can I, marry you two together and we can have a conversation. You can, kind of hash things out and do some in-kind trade relationships, for example. So, I have a client that is, it's always funny how particular occupations, I would say, particular occupations may not be that good at interpersonal communications. But that other client of mine may have trainings already developed because they're the same industry, right? So if both clients are attorney groups, then it makes better sense to have attorneys talk to each other about how to resolve those conflicts. I mean, yes, I can speak about interpersonal conflicts because that's what I do and that's what I've taught for so many years, but they have to look at the nuance of we're attorneys. So what other factors are involved that Kimberly may not be aware of? And so this particular marriage or collaboration, I should say, I said, okay, so how about this? They will coach you on interpersonal communication and you will coach them on effective fundraising. And they're like, yes, great. And so it's about, those strategic partnerships.
I love that. Dr. Kimberly, can you believe we're almost out of time?
Oh my gosh.
So I want to take myself down and allow you to speak to the audience, tell them a little bit more about how they can connect with you and anything else that you feel that's very important to share at this time.
Okay, great. Thank you. So to my fellow small business owners and entrepreneurs, I will leave with you 7 tips. And so the first tip is, you really need to reflect to identify and address your own bias. And you need to think about why is it that I don't want to work with a particular demographic, why I don't want to hire a particular demographic or things like that. And really just be honest with yourself. And if you can't be honest with yourself, then talk to your circle. Speak to people who you may know, but they are not exactly like you, and ask them what they perceive your weaknesses are. And then accept that gracefully and develop a plan to address that. Number 2, look at your leadership team. A lot of times people will hire people that look like them, that act like them, that have the same experiences as them, and you are missing golden opportunities. We need to start looking at how we can diversify our leadership team and get out of groupthink. Because once we're out of groupthink, we are going to create amazing programs, products, and things of that nature. So, I encourage you to look at your leadership team and figure out how you can diversify it, even just for diversity of thought. Number 3, reduce your bias in hiring, interviewing, and in the promotion process. So again, you may have a predominantly white, leadership team or hiring team, HR. Again, it's about being strategic and contacting organizations that are similar to you and saying, hey, we really want to diversify our panels. Would you be willing to come and serve as a panel? And I will do the same for you and explain why you're doing it, because you're trying to hire for diversity. 4, you need to create equitable policies. Again, there's a difference between equity and equality. And so we need to realize that and really create equitable policies. Number 5, initiate conversations and make it comfortable for all of your employees to express their thoughts, concerns, and grievances. So you want to create a psychologically safe space for all of your employees. Number 6, be open-minded to new ideas and ask for feedback. At Harden Consulting Group, we have a lot of young people working with us. And that was by design, because younger people have a different mindset. They have a different perspective than I have. And so, we just love asking them for feedback, for new ideas, and seeing how we can really collaborate and bring those ideas to fruition. And then number 7, this is a model that I developed in graduate school many years ago, and it's called the LEAD model. And LEAD stands for love, enthusiasm, awareness, and development. And so when I say love, it is not, the romantic kind of love. It is a human love to say, I love you and I know you can be better. I want to love you to your fullest capacity, right? So that's what love is to me. But also love is being honest and transparent with people. And then you have to be enthusiastic, right? So when you present information to your colleagues or to your community, you don't want to go in kind of, mean mugging, so to speak. You want to be enthusiastic about the possibility of what could happen. So you want to go in and just be loving and gracious and enthusiastic. The old cliche is, you get more flies with honey or more bees with honey, something like that. You want to be aware. So you want to be aware of your shortcomings. And you want to encourage the other person to become aware. You want to encourage reflection. And once you encourage the reflection, you want to encourage the person to develop. And that means you are developing yourself and you're helping them to develop. So it could be creating an accountability group. It could be, creating a book club. It could be regular check-ins. All of those little things pays great dividends because it's part of the development, right? So again, number 7 is about following the lead model, showing love, being enthusiastic, being aware, and helping the person to develop as well as you developing yourself. So if you have any questions, feel free to contact me at Kimberly@HardenConsultingGroup.com. And you can learn more about how to advance from a performative ally to a genuine accomplice by checking out my book, The Allyship Challenge, available on Amazon.com. Thanks so much.
I love this. This was amazing. And I love your 7 steps. And to our listening audience, we've been here with Dr. Kimberly Harden, who is a diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging expert. She is on a mission to wake up, to revolutionize the world, to shift in our role, because we all have a role in this. And if we can change just our sphere of influence, and we change the mindset of just those around us, it's amazing the ripple effect that it can have. And these 7 steps, let's say we take out 5 and just pick 2. The 2 that jumped out at me, to those that are listening, to those small business owners and entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, these 2 things you can do, and it won't feel like a heavy lift. And like you said, looking at your leadership team and having diversity of thought, getting out of that group think. And the only way to do that is to be with people who have different lived experiences, right? Different backgrounds.
Absolutely. Even, we developed an online course that's launching this fall as well. And even in the development of that, I reached out to my team, and these are, recent college grads. And I said, hey, as, from your experience, what do you think would work best? And I got their feedback and I implemented that because it was good ideas. And, even though maybe at the beginning of it, I was like, I'm not quite sure about that. But I was open-minded enough to do my own research. And then I went back to them. I said, you know what? I think your idea will work with this one minor tweak. And so we collaborate and we do that, not just with those, young college graduates, but everyone on my team and we collaborate. I work with people who have 35 years of experience. They know more than I do. Why wouldn't I collaborate with them? So, this is the first time in history that there's actually 5 generations in the workplace. So there's so much to learn. And I just think it's just amazing because professional growth, people don't think about it. They tend to put things in silos, and life is not like that, right? So, I believe in the personal affecting the personal and vice versa. And so that's how you create the growth mindset. And that's for everyone. Think about how you can learn and grow and get knowledge, right? And because knowledge will make you wise. That's what it's all about. You want to be wise, talk to everyone, get as much information as you can. The thing that my dad taught me was even a fool can teach you something, even if that's how to not be a fool. So I took that and applied it to my life, and I firmly believe in it.
Yes, I love that. The other thing, so this is number 2 that I took out, that again, these are the low-hanging fruits, folks. Being open-minded to new ideas and asking for feedback. right? Don't try to be a know-it-all. Don't get so wedded to being in the box that you're afraid to leave the box, because there is growth and expansion when you step outside the box. And I think I love the lead model, and I just really hope that those that are listening live and watching the replay will take to heart everything that you're saying. And again, if you just have questions and maybe you don't even know what to ask, but you want to have a conversation, Dr. Kimberly Harden and her team is here to guide you and to help you to become more aware so that you can be the change that you want to see in the world. I mean, we always hear that, right? But what does it mean to be in this particular space? Well, requires changing how you think, how you talk, how you act, and how you show up for others, and more importantly, how you allow others to be and freely express who they are.
Absolutely. You know, the other thing that my aunt used to say is think about what you're thinking about. And so that's where the reflection comes in. And so I'm a big proponent of that. And for your viewers, you're more than welcome to schedule a complimentary phone call. Just go to the website, hardenconsultinggroup.com, click the booking link, and it will take you to the calendar where you can schedule a 30-minute session.
Fantastic. Well, Dr. Kimberly, we are already out of time. We'll have to have you back in about 6 months to find out what's happening with the Harden Consulting Group.
It'll be a lot. A lot of things are going to launch this fall. So I'm really excited, a little tired, but excited.
Well, I'm definitely interested in staying in touch with you with your group coaching program.
Oh, great.
I just think I'd like to be a part of that as well.
Oh, I love that. Love to have you.
Well, to our listening audience, thank you so much for joining us for another edition of Choose to Challenge here on E360 TV. We were joined by Dr. Kimberly Harden of the Harden Consulting Group, the DEI&B, I kind of flipped that, expert, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging expert. And ladies and gentlemen, life is changing rapidly before us, and we can be a part of the change or be overtaken by the wave of change. And we believe that you can make a difference, but it first starts with becoming aware, changing the narrative, aligning your action to be that positive change that we want to see in the world, creating a world that's truly diverse, equitable, inclusive, and respecting everyone in a belonging environment. Thank you so much for joining us in another edition of Choose to Challenge. And remember that when your life aligns with opportunity, your vision in your life aligns with opportunity, success is inevitable. Until next time, bye everyone.